Well, Natalie, look, it is so good to have you here. You're in Portugal, I'm in Australia. I always have the impression, that they are two little pieces of paradise and real centers of innovation. So it's such an honor to have you join us here at the Optimism Cafe at the Centre for Optimism.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. It's wonderful to be here on two opposite ends of the time zones.
We absolutely are. So look, optimism is a belief that good things will happen and that things will work out in the end. Natalie, what makes you optimistic? Nature or nurture?
Wow. Well, I do think it's a good mixture of both. I think, I was born to very optimistic people. My parents are, they're in their late 80s now, and they're still like riding high on the waves of optimism in their life, and have always been very much sort of focused on the possibility of good things happening, even when bad things are happening. It's that ability, I think, to be able to reframe and look at life through that lens of anticipation and hope that things will be better. So I think, there's definitely a degree of nurture there, and being around parents and in a family like that certainly shaped my value system and my perception of life. I also think that, there is a degree of what we're born with too. Obviously, it's genetics too. So I'm sure I've inherited some things from my parents there. But I don't know whether or not you have come across the Enneagram, which is one of the most ancient typologies for looking at personality and psychological development, spiritual development. Well, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, and the 7s are called the creative visionaries. And actually their gift, if you like, their essence, the thing that they give the world is that sense of optimism and hope and joy and possibility that things can be different, can be better.
I am just listening to you today. Daniel Lambert talked to me about the perfume of possibility. So it sounds
Beautiful.
like it's been your milieu, both growing up and now in your global movements. So what is it that makes you feel optimistic? So, what are the habits, the experiences, the joys which foster and strengthen your optimism?
Yeah, I think vision is the biggest thing. I think having that sense of purpose and vision about where you want life to be, that state of anticipation about what you want to create in life, as well as being quite content with where you are. And I think that is sometimes a challenge for optimists, because we tend to live very much in the future, about the future that can be created. And I know for myself, it's been a journey of being really content, yet full of a sense of moreness, of what could be created, what could be invented, what could be brought into the world. So I have a number of practices, I suppose, that help me, and also I probably wouldn't see them as techniques, but now I have studied a lot in psychology as well. Things like reframing, so when something goes, isn't going to plan as to what you may want, or life happens all the time, doesn't it, to us? It's that ability to be able, and 7s are very, very good at this. That's why I didn't even know it was a technique. The ability to sort of look at something and reframe it very, very fast, like in sometimes a nanosecond, to say, okay, well, what good is in here? What can I take out of this situation? What is the positive aspect of this, of what I'm going through? That's a huge thing. I think the ability to be able to look at life that way. I think journaling is a very good practice. I'm a big writer and a journaler. I've been journaling, another practice that I adopted from my mother, who's a big journaler, since the age of 9, and I'm 55 now. So I have many, many, many journals. And actually last night I was going through because I've moved to Portugal, big crates of boxes and getting out all these journals and going through them, and that's quite exciting, seeing your life in word. So lots of different things. I think, you know, the mental aspect, the practice of journaling, the way that we see the world, I think, is the biggest thing that really enables to have that vision to go forward.
Yeah, no, we often say optimism is not the state of the world, it's the state of your mind. And it was almost eerie when you talked about contentment. Today I visited my mother's grave and
Wow.
took some fresh flowers, and she always talked about contentment as being much more important than the pursuit of happiness. And
Yeah.
if you're optimistic, that you are more likely to experience joy. You
Yes,
see the good
because
things.
in that moment, isn't it? It's in that moment. Sometimes I think one of, not a downside of optimism, but something that we have to be aware of as optimists is you can be experiencing something and actually it's a wonderful experience, but your mind is already moving on to the next thing. It's like the anticipation of the next moment. And it's like sometimes I have to rein myself back and just say, I am here. I'm here right now, and I'm never, ever going to be here again in this moment. And then just to feel the energy of life.
Yeah.
And I think that is a wonderful thing. And then obviously you can start planning, you know, new things or whatever's coming ahead of you. But that's lovely. That's a lovely thing to share. Thank you, Victor.
Oh, you're the wonderful one. So you know, you are a leader of leaders. You foster leadership. So who have been the positive leaders, the bosses, the colleagues, family and friends who've inspired you?
Well, first of all, parents, I think, have been the biggest inspirations for me and continue to be. I think, you know, if I think of the workplace, obviously I have been out of the corporate world since 2006 when I set up my own company in London. But prior to that, in my sort of early days of work, you know, working in corporate or working in business and having the traditional boss, you know, I have had a couple of very good ones along the way, which has you know, really helped to shape my early career. I worked for a boutique consultancy practice after I graduated from the London School of Economics. I did a master's degree there. And I had a fabulous boss, and he was, you know, he was such a curious, optimistic person too. And we were doing really interesting research together. It was just him and I. So I was hired as his research analyst to look at how markets for education and technology was shaping educational markets. And I think what he did, which opened up me at that relatively younger age, was the reading. You know, he would always encouraging me to read different books, philosophy, ideas, you know, business, psychology, and you know, we would debate and talk and have that space for real reflection amidst, you know, the business context. And so he had a huge influence on shaping me professionally and personally, actually. I had another boss back in British Telecom days, and that was quite interesting because I was hired to be a data analyst, which was really not my skill set. And I had this boss, and he was a lot younger than me, actually. But he said to me, Natalie, you're in the wrong role. I think we're going to shape your role to become a strategic analyst. And that obviously suited my skill set and my perception, because I was a forward thinker and I always liked to be seeing what was changing in the world and how we could adapt to that change and create new services, new products. And I think him being able to see my potential at that sort of that younger age and being able to call that forth and say, let's shape a role for you, was a very, very significant thing. And, you know, there are many others, you know, that I could mention, but they were two that just came to my mind.
Yeah, to be able to grab that opportunity to lead in strategy. So let me take you to your Women Who Lead project. And I just find, you know, the entire idea so evocative. So do you want to tell us a bit more about that and what you hope to achieve?
Yeah, so Women Who Lead, basically I started to develop this with a good friend of mine, Vina Rampel, in London many years ago, because we were both talking about the lack of sort of leadership development for executive women that really had a integrated wellness and a holistic view of the person. So it wasn't just about training, you know, or learning new stuff, but really going deeper into the self to understand one's strengths, one's challenges around being a leader, and doing that in an environment which would make you feel sort of really relaxed, really in tune with nature, in tune with yourself. And really that was where the idea came from, to sort of combine the wellness aspect with leadership development and create retreats in beautiful places. So I have run these Women Who Lead retreats for many years in Bali, in Singapore, in Malaysia. I ran one recently in Portugal. And the whole purpose is to take women on a journey to help them really understand themselves through the Enneagram, which we use as a coaching tool. And then we also look at vision. Yeah, where are you going? What is the next big thing that's being called in you right now? Whether if it's in corporate leadership, maybe it's the next big role, or if it's entrepreneurial, maybe it's the business idea that someone's got. And then using the 6 I's of innovation, which is the methodology I've invented for innovating, to help people to get clear on that, their purpose around it, the opportunities that they have, the ideas that they have, how they're going to test them, how they're going to get investment for them, etc. And then they leave the end of the weekend with really a stronger sense of themselves and some shifts in their own personality, but also a clear plan, you know, what they want to do, where they want to grow as a person. So that's the sort of retreat side. And then I also have a coaching business around that too, which is more one-on-one or masterminds, where we do like small groups of women together.
That's brilliant. I still, that notion of the plan, Jacinda Ardern, who's just retired as New Zealand Prime Minister when she was at the climate summit, said, you know, you can drive yourself to paralysis by pessimism, but, you know we've got the technology, we know we've got the means. Now it's time for action and optimism. So you really remind me of the New Zealand Prime Minister and her optimistic leadership around that. Now, you talked about innovation, obviously, and yeah, one of the things we promote at the Centre for Optimism is that notion that if you want to recruit for innovation, you need to have optimists. And you know, the coronation was, of course, on the weekend, and Penny Mordaunt, you know, who was carrying the sword for the king, said something quite famously last year. The fault line in politics at the moment is not between left and right, but between optimists and pessimists. You know, we need optimists for the next tough shift. So when you think about that, and you think about the women you're coaching and, you know, your innovation, how does optimism and generating infectious optimism fit in?
Yeah, I think it is huge in innovation, because obviously with innovating, what we're trying to do is bring into the world things that don't exist, or don't exist in a form for which they could be. I mean, it may not be a radical innovation, it might be more an incremental thing, but it's still something new. So you need to have a lot of optimism, because you've got to have a strong sense of belief to be able to carry that through. And I think if we break down the innovation journey, you know, into different areas, I call the identifiers, those that can see, those that are good at like standing on the mountain and looking ahead, or looking into the horizon, or, you know, looking down through the binoculars, or through the lighthouse, you know, that sort of analogy of being able to see the possibility of what could be that isn't here yet. And to call that forth, you know, in terms of leadership, gives people a huge sense of hope that things could be different. Because actually, at the end of the day, everything that we have, we've invented. You know, even the soft things like culture, which are not so soft, it's all invention, it's all creation, it's all something that people have come up with and then created and formed systems around. And so why not be able to do it again? Why not be able to reinvent and to look at things in a very fresh light? So I think we need huge doses of optimism, not just for identifying opportunity, but for being able to actually manage those ideas through, particularly into implementation, into partner building, collaboration, making sure that we're building something sustainable. You have to have that ability to be able to see in your mind's eye, not necessarily the answers, but to see the where it could be and what the outcome, the result might be or look like from a more positive perspective. And so I think it's a very, very fundamental aspect if we look at innovation as a totality.
The story of Dyson, the vacuum cleaner guy, he says he had 5,000 models before he achieved commercial success. 15 years of persistence, and a failure and always another crack at it is the essence. So look, the last question I'd like to throw at you, one of my favorite thinkers is Singapore's senior minister. And of course, you lived in Malaysia, just across the border. And last year, Tharman gave a powerful speech on the collapse of optimism in the developed world. And if I just read this very short quote, "Creating bases for optimism has to be our central task everywhere in the world and through global collaboration. We must create bases for optimism to see ourselves through this long storm and to emerge intact, emerge a better place, and it can be done." I think he's almost channeling you. So how do you think we're going on meeting that challenge of his?
Well, I'm sure, there are pockets all over the world, aren't there? I mean, obviously, if you look at the news, you can go spiral down into pessimism and despair. But I think, the news obviously just gives us one perspective of the world. And it is just a perspective, and it's completely curated. And, and there are other sources of news that we can get our thoughts from. I think, even when we may be looking at, we are facing some really challenging times as humans, not just as humans, but as the whole species of all species on Earth, and also our Earth itself, so we have to be realistic about these things that are going on. But it's not about a realism that can, that will just take us down into pessimism and despair and feel that we can't do anything. Because if we have that feeling, then we won't be able to do anything because we're going to be immobilized from the word go. So I think it is really looking at the reality of life and some of the very, very difficult things that we're facing, and then being able to get that new vision and to be able to rally people behind the reinvention of what we have, and to really, to get power behind that. And that needs to be in all walks of life, from politics and economics, from education and technology and the whole piece. But I think, there are pockets of it happening. It's just to get that collective momentum, which is always a challenge. And I think if we're just looking at some sources of news, that you may feel that it isn't happening at all. So we do need to be looking at, and having those positive stories to inspire people.
Well, you do that, don't you, with your women who lead and the stories you share in the retreats. So I think you don't just preach it, you live it. So look, that's been fantastic. Is there a question that I haven't asked you, or a last message you'd like to share in the Optimism Cafe?
Well, one of the things I have done is I've written a book called Yes, You Can Innovate. And I would just love to say to everybody listening to this is that, the word innovation can sometimes be just like this big amorphous sort of, sense of things. But I think when we really bring it down into our own lives and what we're doing, and it's even more these days, it's that sense of, what is our own purpose, our own contribution? Where are our skills? Where are your skills? What mindsets do you have? Where can you play the best game in this game of life, in a sense? Where can you give the most and be of service the most? And are you doing that? And if not, why not? And to really understand that, everybody can contribute, and everybody has a role to play. And yes, you can innovate, which is very much the title of my book.
Well, I think everyone should go out and get it, because it is a great book. And really, really appreciate your time on this beautiful, beautiful day. Thanks, Natalie. Have a great day.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you.